They told me it was fixed, water's running, so,
You'll find out when you get there, I guess.
yeah, well,
That's never fun. It's part of owning property, though.
that's right.
Part of owning property.
Have you been out to the new house?
It was nice in there. But it was
They
good.
poured
It could be, I think after tomorrow, it's supposed to be pretty nice. I think.
and that section
Where's
they
that?
added on the back.
Oh, my God.
Must be going for a
Dollar.
$1.
That's
full of
dirt,
dirt.
so.
They don't want a basement on the
That's, I
heard
heard
it was
the more they
barbecue.
put good, it's sure smaller that house gets. Basement.
Hoping to get 2 rocks with it.
They're big houses.
No,
It probably
they
looks a little portable.
they always look little though, when it's just before.
It must be going up.
What do we got?
Did you notice that?
Well, they had
I'm assuming it's
that plastic back insulation that normally gets put on there,
Dirt back in it.
and then they, I think they put 3 more inches or something. Yeah, it gets pretty noisy over here.
You're right here. You dig out the middle of the yard, so I can't find it. Not. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
If you want, Carter's McDonald's here. If you want, they'll do their presentation first. We'll do that before we get into the report. I failed to have Jennifer listed on the agenda.
Do we need?
If you guys want one, what's in here? Yes, we do. For legal. Just legal. Oh, yeah, we do actually need it for.
I
The
want
light bulb was a little slow, but it's on now.
motion. It says in June of '72, the operation and maintenance of the city sewer collection system was transferred from the city department to NMU. I move we give it back. Do you hear that?
Dewey's right over there.
Yeah, he's not paying.
You can't hear.
That's all right.
If
You
you
want
guys,
to hear what we said?
if you guys want to go ahead and start
Yeah,
at
we'll start
8:30.
All right, let's call the meeting to order.
We got straps.
Tony, sorry. First item is the adoption of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving on, the minutes from the August 12th meeting. Any amendments or additions?
Move we approve the minutes as presented. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Got some guests today. Is Dewey, you got anything from the city side for us?
Oh, guys, I'm good. I appreciate all this you're doing here. Appreciate what you did the other night out at the Martin Center. Wish we would have had a better turnout, but unfortunately, it's kind of how our citizens treat all of us sometimes. If we could get them out there and explain this to them, it'd really be beneficial, let them know what you guys are trying to do. Appreciate what you're trying to do to get the information out.
Thank you. We do have a presentation from our friends at Burns and Mac today, so I would like to turn the floor over to them.
Okay. Got anything to say?
Um,
Start that?
No, I don't. Just, I'd like to welcome Burns and McDonald's. We've got their design build team here. Brian's here. The meeting we had the other night with Jeff and Allie was pretty much kind of going over the project itself. Some of the funding and the needs. I think kind of what we're going to discuss today is more kind of the contract details, where they got to the pricing, some of the bids they received, some of the challenges I think that they saw on pricing, lead times, those type of things. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Brian.
Thanks, Jeff. I'm Brian Canzaneri, Burns and McDonald. There's a kind of a large contingent of us here today because we've got a meeting this afternoon, like Jeff just said, or after your utility meeting to go over some more details. But anyway, this presentation is just to show you where the pricing came in for the contract. We've been working with you all for just about a year now. I know Jeff and Caitlin and Amanda have been working with you guys much longer than that to get to the design solution we're at today, but they engaged Kevin and I think last November to get some budgetary pricing together, and I think I'm happy to tell you we generally right where we thought we'd be. We had to pivot and do some things differently over the last couple of months because there's been a lot of challenges in the market to get to the number we're at. But I think we're where we wanted to be and where we told you we'd be last November. So with that, we can go ahead and hit the first slide. So our quick safety moment, Jeff. We do one of these at every meeting. So I picked severe weather today, actually, because everything going on with the hurricane, but considering the day we're having is appropriate, I guess. So severe weather, things to keep in mind, we should always have a plan for your family, whether it be homework or school. Know where to take shelter. Don't underestimate thunderstorms and straight line winds. No, we don't get a lot of hurricanes up this way, but we definitely get some straight line windstorms. And I was reading it, 100 miles an hour, not uncommon for a straight line wind. That can tip a car, knock down a tree, cause a lot of damage. You want to know where you're going to get your weather service updates, and be aware of things overhead and around your home. I was also reading this morning, I think only one person died down in Ida, down south. 45 have died up in the Northeast. And the reason is because they're not prepared for storms like that up there. They don't get a lot of hurricanes up there. That's why they do so much damage up there. Most of the folks that perished up there either drowned in a basement or in a car. It only takes like 6 inches of water to sweep a car. So, that is something we should be mindful of here because we flood here, right? Floods out on site, we know that. So things to keep in mind. And then after a storm, when you've got a lot of debris, you need to be conscious of there's broken limbs that could fall, you or your home, you want to get those taken care of, you want to stay away from down power lines, stuff like that. Okay. All right, I wasn't going to spend a lot of time talking about the scope, but I kind of presume that you guys know what we're doing out there, but the project is to renovate this aeration basin over here, and then these 3 clarifiers, got new blowers, new electrical system, and infrastructure to support that. That's the next one. And this is the solution that was chosen for the aeration basins, which is a removable diffuser system. We've kind of gone around and around a little bit over the last 6 months with the actual layout. This is where we landed, and I think that's going to give Nolan the gang there the best operations and maintenance considerations after a couple of iterations. But that's a typical assembly of what they look like. So, kind of cool thing about these is you can pull them out and replace them. You don't have to drain the tank to get out. So basis of estimate, just wanted to talk about what we did a year ago and then what we've done now. The way we set the budget last year was Kevin over here, our pre-construction manager, did a bottoms-up estimate. So got with Caitlin, the design group, and we came up with, they have very conceptual design. We got quantities from them. We looked at what they were doing, and we built it from the bottoms up with earthwork, concrete, piping, electrical quantities. Kevin, our estimator, Joel, who's our electrical estimator, did man-hour takeoffs for the quantities. Pulled all the rates and everything for Salina County. We also went to vendors and we got budgetary quotes on the clarifiers, the electrical gear, and then those diffuser systems that you saw there. So, we look at that. We put a certain level of contingency on there because we've got very little design done, so we only know the little bit we see and just what we know from our experience. So put some contingency on that to accommodate some design growth and things of that nature and escalation and things like that. So fast forward until about 6 weeks ago, we got the preliminary design. Designs come along. We put that into work packages and gone to the market and got actual pricing, right? So we can skip forward one. These are the major components of the project that we went out for competitive pricing on, and the bids we got, and the bidders we went to. So the civil mechanical work, we are buying all of the equipment, we're buying all the piping, we got hard pricing from vendors on those things. We went out to 4 wastewater contractors for installation of that. We got 2 bids, and those are 2. And we actually do a lot of work with both of those firms, and did our shakeout with Rodmacher, felt real good about it. So that's who we're carrying for the mechanical work and a little bit of civil. Electrical, a little bit different story there. We do a lot of work with these three firms, but we kind of had a big spread. We did sit down with RS Electric. We do feel like they have the whole job. They're familiar with the site. They've come out and walked it with me and Nolan. I know they're out there helping you guys right now. We did a thorough good review with them, and I feel like they got it done. I'm gonna skip this one just for a minute. Clarifiers, kind of the clarifier. There's 4 or 5 good firms out there that make them. We got 3 bids. They're all real tight. We're going with Clearstream, who is a low cost provider. Blowers, we're going to end up with Airzone. We were actually able to, we bid 2 packages there. We had a base bid with positive displacement blowers. We got an alternate bid from all 3 of these folks for a screw type blower, which is a higher efficiency blower, less power usage. It's got like a 2-year payback on it. So we went with that option, which is a little bit more expensive, but it's going to pay for itself in about 3 years. And then our integrator, we're going to end up with the John, I think it's going to work out with more, but also help us do the integration on today's project, which is basically the exact same integration. Dropping back to this one, this is the aeration system, the diffuser system, walkway assemblies, bridges, the whole, pretty much the internal is the aeration tank. The city did have a little bit of spread here, and we got the additional bids in. We went to 2 suppliers. This is kind of a special piece of equipment. We had talked about sourcing it, just based on where the market is. We really don't like to source things. We don't have a whole lot of leverage to do that. And we go into comparison price and value of things. There was a bit of a spread, but what we noticed was that we didn't really dictate to them how to configure the basins, and they had 2 very different installations. The Parks and folks had something that was a previous iteration that we had drawn up, and the Jaeger folks had something that we had further developed. Although on the surface it looks like these guys are more expensive, it puts down on other costs outside of the basin. So with the Parkson arrangement that we had previously, we had more duct bank around the basin, which added costs. We had a lot of issues with trying to figure out how to get at the mixers that are submerged down in the basin, how to get them up off the walkways. The structural engineer had a lot of concern with the existing walkways on the basin. There was cost there for beefing those up and figuring out how to reach the mixers back. We did go back to Jaeger and get a deduct to go back to that previous design just so we could kind of have an apples to apples, and they did come in the ballpark here, but in the end, what we're proposing is to go with the more robust Jaeger design, which again, if we were to go to the other design, it would just add cost elsewhere. So that's right. Okay, so we sat down with Jeff and Tony last week and kind of went through the whole estimate where the numbers came from. Those are the main prices that I showed you. There's many more that we got for other miscellaneous things. We've got a precast building that we're going to buy and set. Got crane pricing for that, things of that nature. But those are the main subs that we're going to do. So this is where it's all shaken out. We've got our, what I'm going to call direct cost of work, which is all where all our subs and vendors fall up here, and the cost of actually getting the work done on the site. And down here, we have more of the kind of overhead management, design costs, construction, project management costs. And I think really closely aligns to the way we laid it out last year. I think, you know, if you go back and look, the contingency shrunk because we were at a very preliminary level of design back then. We're still not fully detailed out, so we're still keeping some contingency here, but it's less than we had last year because we got less distance to go with the design. And then also we have an owner's allowance down here. This is money that is technically in the contract, but we can't use it without Jeff and Nolan's consent. And we put this in here because there was some risk on the project that we didn't want a price that we think may not come to fruition. So I didn't want to inflate the number and carry that, and then it doesn't happen, and we have to try to extract it out later and get a credit back or it's buried somewhere. So there are three things, and I'll just give you an example. We're replacing the mechanisms in the clarifier. It's our experience that that grout in the bottom of your clarifier might be kind of chipped up, and you might need to replace it. We had originally got a price with Rodmacher to chip it all up and replace it. It was up over $100,000, and we just sat down and talked with them. The clarifiers are full, and we're just assuming we have to replace it. We don't know that we have to replace it. We may not have to replace it. And I think, without him being able to see it and us being able to see it, we made a lot of assumptions and we put a lot of costs in there to deal with it. And at the end of the day, we might get down there and it's fine. So rather than carry that up in our number, I wanted to leave that down below for you guys to control, and then it'll all be transparent. If we get down there and only a portion needs to be done, we just take care of the T&M, and you guys will have a bucket of money to play with. And if none of it happens, then we keep it. So that's why we got a little bit of money. That is the extent of my slides. It's kind of a brief presentation. Do you guys have questions?
You visited the Hayes Kansas, and I think you mentioned it somewhere along the line. This is basically the same thing that they have out there. And then I had a question about vendor pricing. A lot of different quotes in there. And I guess with the Jaeger thing, I need a little bit of a better understanding of why we're going with the higher bid there.
So that's the same system that's in Hayes.
Yeah.
I think from kind of going through and looking, there were some applications that Parkson had been that weren't maybe as good. And this seems to be a better working system. I mean, I don't.
I think as Brian had mentioned too, the Parkson system, it wasn't really an apples to apples because it was going to create increase in costs in other areas to go with that system. Piping prices were going to go up. Supports, I don't think they had the mixers, was going to cost extra money to have those installed. So really when you factor that in, I think we're a lot closer. And then after actually evaluating the systems, there's Parkson has a system that's been, I think, within the last 6 months placed into service, and they're having issues with it, with the diffusers wanting to float up, and so hopefully that kind of explains a little bit. We picked the system we feel like is going to serve us the best over a long term, and then there is some costs associated with going with the Parkson system that you don't see in their bid. Is that accurate, Brian?
It's accurate. I had another slide in the back here in anticipation. This is what the original design it looked like. You see these 4 mixers here in the basin. These, it's not fully drawn out, but these would have walkways out to them. And when we had this configuration, we had a lot of duct bank around here to get at each one of these walkways. The picture we had shown on the previous slide, we changed from that orientation, and instead of having mixers all over, we have another bridge. Kind of makes it cross through the basin, and all our mixers are there. And that saved us a lot of duct bank costs, and it also gave Nolan a different access point to cart these mixers off, because these ones on the back side here, there'll be 4 of them on the bottom. If you're standing at the bottom of the hill, looking up at that basin, it's going to be really hard to get at those mixers and get them off the platforms. So we're trying to get a way to cart them over to the roadside instead. So this is the layout that Parkson did. the other layout can be put forward, like, to the beginning slide. You can kind of see how we pivoted and how we've got that cross section. So there's a lot more steel here, but there's a lot less peripheral costs around the basin. So I think if we go back to Parkson's proposal, we're gonna end up, their costs would be less, but other costs would be more. And, you know, we kind of didn't have apples to apples for this because this was Gummy Acres solution, and we didn't want to give that to their competitor and say, hey, go price your competitor's stuff. So instead, we kind of made him go backwards, and we said, give us a credit to go to the peripheral walkways.
And that was a lot closer.
Cost wise, with those additional costs that the other system would, I mean, realistically, it's not that much different dollar wise. And then this looks a lot more efficient, I guess, at the moment.
Right. And if you can see too on that picture where the bridges are aligned, I think Nolan worked with them there to keep from, because the air piping's, is that 12 inch?
It's 12 inch, I believe. too.
12 inch, and it's stainless steel. So they made, you know, we worked to cut down on costs. You know, the electrical's not going to be as much for this system as well. So, and I think the Gummy Yeager system's just a better system. I think we're going to be, we want to fix this, replace this, and move on and not have to, you know, similar to the Headworks. We want a good system installed. It's going to last for a long time. And I think once we factor in everything, that small increase is well worth it. It'll pay over the life of the system.
Do it once, do it right.
Do it once and do it right.
Let the
Yeah,
next board work.
yeah,
Yeah, I think Jeff just nailed it. I mean, operationally, you might spend a little more money up front capital costs, but in the long run, it's gonna save you on the back end. Because once the system goes in, you can't afford to have it go back and have it, your other basin's not in good shape either. So once this thing's up and running, you don't wanna have to take it down and do repairs and rely on your other basin as your primary.
yeah. We don't want our diffusers floating up off the bottom.
Right.
And we did, so I'll tell you, like, over the course of the last year, pricing has been volatile, especially with steel, and we've got kind of a lot of steel in this job. Our budget a year ago was much less for the system internal here, and we ended up optimizing a lot of the design elsewhere to end up with the same number that we were at. I remember we had a lot of discussion about where the electrical building was gonna go. We used to have a bigger building that was kind of centralized, longer runs of duct bank in anticipation of building out their second building. But after a lot of kind of rounding around with Kev and looking at pricing, Caitlin and team with different designs, we kind of figured that we could do it much more efficiently if we built you a smaller building. We could make it precast, drop it right by this basin. Doing that would be, that'll be cheaper than building you a big central building with really long duct banks, even if you go and do the second basin and we have to drop you another building there too. I think this works.
As he had mentioned, we've been working on this a year, and there's been a lot of back and forth, and I feel real good about where we're at as far as cost savings and trying to optimize, the resources and save money and come up with what's still a really good design. So.
Can you go back to the numbers at the end? I can't see them. I can see that far.
No, operationally, is this going to be functioning different? I mean, is there going to be additional training or?
There will be some, like currently we, everything, like our blowers are operated just off the DO probe, a single DO probe in that entire basin. I think the new system will have 2 DO probes and 2 ORC probes, which is oxygen reduction potentially. So, now our blowers are just all on or all off, or 100% running or not. These will be all selected, so they'll be making adjustments themselves. But there's going to be some training there. It's going to be a learning curve for a little while, but I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. I mean, I think it'll be back to, 13 years ago when I started there, where you walk by and make sure everything's running and you go on. That's not something that's going to be a headache.
I think they'll have time to learn because they're not going to be working on, I mean, now it's just, you fix something and then you turn around and you fix it again. And that's to the point we're at now. I mean, everything's,
It's going to be exponentially better than what we currently do.
That's great.
they said you didn't need to bring those back.
Oh, yeah. If I don't listen.
Original bid 13.6 or 13.8 or something.
It was 13 and a half somewhere, and we trimmed it down
What
to,
did we trim? Just out of curiosity.
so what we trimmed out was the
Extra basin.
the second peanut. We eliminated, that was the biggest savings.
Yeah.
A little bit of stuff at the headworks. We found out another avenue to correct that. Nolan's group has already actually worked on that, in kind of more of in-house. So we pulled some things out of there that we felt like we could do. But really the big dollar amount was the second peanut. Because we've only needed the one. Switching to a retrievable system, you don't have to have two, so you can switch from one to, while you're working on this one, you've got to have. And we really, spent a lot of time going over that to make sure that was the right decision. It wasn't going to put us in a situation that wasn't going to be good. So we feel pretty good about, the retrievable system that we can maintain while it's in service. And
It seems to be much safer in the scheme of things too.
a lot lower maintenance. You don't have those wheels, you don't have the bearings, it's just operationally going to be, we don't know exactly what our operational costs are going to go down. We just know they are going to go down. And that's hard to quantify at this time, but should be, like he'd mentioned, we went with screw blowers versus positive displacement. Well, there's $100,000 more for a screw blower. Well, they've run the numbers and the paybacks 3 years on electrical savings. So that's pretty significant. You're looking at $30,000+ a year just from that one thing. So the blowers are going to run a lot less maintenance.
I don't have any other questions. Word, anything we're not asking that we should be asking?
I don't think so. I think Nolan and Jeff have been asking those questions the whole way along.
No, I really appreciate your guys' work. They've been really good to work with. I think this is going to be a great project, great improvement for our community and for a lot of years to come. I feel real good about where we ended up, particularly from where we started. We were, a little over $13 million, and these guys have been great to work with because they take our input and turn that into something that I think in the long run is better suited for us and has helped from a pricing standpoint as well. So look forward to continuing our work with them.
Thanks for laying it all out there. We're trying to be as transparent as we can with our community and with our ratepayers. So pretty black and white.
And we're gonna go through the same thing on the North Street pump station, right? Transparency, early cost certainty like we did on this one, so.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for your time. Yeah, appreciate it. Get to work.
And they get to come back when this meeting's over, because we've got 62 pages of drawings to review, I think, with Amanda. We've already done some of that, so we're moving forward.
We're not gonna make that.
Yeah, you guys, you know. Now Steven, on the other hand, we might need him on the electrical.
Thanks for having us, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yep.
guys.
Thanks, we'll see you here in a little bit.
Okay, cool. Well,
Good job on the donuts, too.
They were good. I was gonna say.
No.
Yes.
He did.
They're hiding behind the stone.
Told me to go hard.
You're doing a good job.
How was it?
Oh, okay.
All right. I recommend it.
All right, I don't think we got any other audience members, so let's just dive right into reports and start with electric distribution. Doug.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I do have one action item for you. Hope you have a memo there in front of you. It's for Southeast Substation upgrades. This is for the concrete foundation construction. We opened bids, or we sent out bids, and that opened there Friday, August 27th. We only received one bid. We sent out a total of 9, contacted 3 additional contractors that indicated that they would no bid. The only bid we got back was from Septagon. Reviewing that bid with LD&B, our consulting engineers, we feel that it meets the spec. They can do it in a timely manner. They've done quality work for us in the past. This is a pretty important piece of equipment that we need to have in as soon as possible. The transformer is scheduled to be shipped November 5th of that week. I'm not sure how long it's going to be in transit. I assume within a week of transit, wherever it is. So we need to get that foundation poured and a place for that transformer to be set when it gets here. So with that, my recommendations for a motion to accept the bid from Septagon Construction for Southeast Substation concrete foundation construction in the amount of $43,074. This is for 3 foundations. The transformer pad, which is 17 by 22, 2 feet thick, 2 layers of number 6 steel on foot centers. Pretty good chunk of concrete. I think they spec'd in samples to be taken with brake tests on scheduled brake test on that. And then the circuit switcher pad, it's 2 foot thick also. I forget the dimensions, and then another 13 2 kV bus support foundation. Basically, it's a pier foundation. What it is, it's a 2 foot hole, 6 feet deep. I volunteered my crew, my guys, to dig that hole because we have equipment to do it. Pretty simple. That did save us a little bit. But,
They have a compaction test that they got to perform for that.
I don't remember seeing anything about a compaction test. It's got to be compacted under it. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, did they take any soil tests down there, LD&B? This project's been going on for 2
Yeah, I don't
years.
remember.
They've done a
That's
lot of
something
work
I checked
on
on.
I would ask for some kind of compaction test before
Yeah.
they pour that much concrete.
Yeah.
Just, you don't want to, 3 years from now, have
it. Leading
a
transformer. Right.
Yeah,
That's
it
the only
does say in the
thing
design that it's got to
that's
be,
wrong with that.
that it has to be compacted, but I'm not sure about testing on that. But
There's
it does,
got to be a certain level of compaction.
I think that's listed in
Yeah.
the specs. But yeah, we'll make sure it gets done.
That's.
You need to add that to the motion, Jeff, pending.
No, I just. I trust Doug to take care of that.
Just out of curiosity, is this quote somewhere close to what you'd estimated it would be?
it was a little higher than what I thought, to tell you the truth. I did voice that concern with the contractor. Typically, they say with the material that, rebar, a lot of steel there, a lot of concrete, a lot of yards, concrete's going up. I think it's $130+ a yard now. They said typically the way they bid, or a lot of people bid, and I know this to be true, is whatever their material that they're going to have involved, the concrete, rebar, labor stuff, or not labor, but material that they're going to have involved in that, they just usually multiply by 2, and that's their labor. So they said they fell right in there where And I feel that they're competitive because I knew we sent it out to 9 other vendors. Some of their close competitors, anywhere from Columbia to Kansas City area, some local guys. I called guys in Sedalia, try to get everybody I could to bid on it. The response I got was prior commitments and lack of help was why they didn't bid on it. We did have some liquidated damages because of the time, the time schedule that we had. We have to get this done by a certain date. It's got to be done by October 22nd, I think, to allow enough time for the brake test to be done before the transformer can be set on it. So there was liquidated damages in there if they don't get done by the due date. I'm not sure if that may have scared some of them off. The performance bonding, the bid bonding, had to be a pretty reputable company to be able to do all that would want to go through all that to bid on this project.
Thank you.
We've been happy with Septicon all.
We have. We've had them in the past. They've done a lot of projects for us. They've done real well for us.
The key here is really timing. I mean, because if the transformer is delivered, we have to offload it. And if we don't have somewhere to set it, we're gonna have to pay that expense twice. We're gonna have to have a crane in twice. So whatever, and that cost is gonna be quite a bit. So, I mean, I just soon do it once and be done, and not have to pay those costs twice. And then we're getting in a pretty tight window now, like Doug said, you getting this in and having it cured long enough to do the brake test and
Weather to deal with and
weather and everything else. So it's just,
I move we accept the bid from Septicon Construction for Southeast Substation Concrete Foundation Construction in the amount of $43,074.
Second. A motion, and a second to accept the bid from Septicon Construction for Southeast Substation Concrete Foundation Construction in the amount of $43,074. All in favor? Opposed? Where's the transformer coming from?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Here, doesn't matter.
Columbia.
It's been, I think it's
our
further.
last one was from Columbia. They came in on a
I was thinking it
boat.
was South America.
It was.
The last one was, from the South America.
I don't think this one is.
I don't think it is either. No,
I don't remember right off the top of my head. I think it's
in the States, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I think
What was
it's,
the lead time on it?
It's supposed to be here, shipped November 5th. So actually,
it's been ordered for some time.
It's been ordered for
That
years
was kind
already.
of the first piece of equipment we ordered due to the long lead time.
It was ordered earlier this year, yeah. Thank you, gentlemen. Just a few more updates. Old Boy Tree Trimming is moving right along. They did get called off temporarily for the Hurricane Ida. That was short-lived. They are actually returned. They didn't need them, so they'll be back Tuesday. Overhead to underground project went pretty well. That project is now complete. Crew's got that all wrecked out, cleaned up there. That's 16 more houses that we've got buried feeding on underground. Other than that's about it. Just a few updates on some of the equipment that we've got ordered. The Ford cabin chassis that we ordered, it was due last week. We called, checked the factory, just really doesn't have any information at all. So there wasn't anything that could tell us as far as when or how long, sooner or later. There just wasn't anything that they could tell us. The forklift's still due November 19th, and the personnel lift that we'd ordered is scheduled to be delivered next February 11th. Other than that, that's all I've got. Any questions?
Where's Label Street?
Label Street. It's over by the college.
Used to be Bell.
Yeah, it used to be
Never heard of
Bell. It used to be Bell. and they changed it.
Okay.
It's just a short section over there. It used to be Bell. There were actually two Bell Streets. There was one behind what's now Tower Realty, and then that one. So they changed one to Label. So you didn't have, and I think that's correct.
I think it's right, yeah. It used to be BE.
There was Bell that runs behind the
Yeah.
home store.
Yeah, there is.
That's
Yeah.
Bell Street.
That's Bell.
Yeah, and that's the one, and it continues and it runs, when it gets south, it's behind Tower Realty. And then there was another Bell that was ran east and west down by the college, so they changed it to Label, or LaBelle.
Any other questions for Doug? Thank you, Doug. Let's move on to the finances with Tony.
Morning.
Morning.
I believe I gave everyone a copy of the budget. I know we went over the draft. Gosh, it was a month ago. But there is some changes in there, nothing major, but I figured I would go through and just kind of share with you guys some of the changes and then answer questions. On page 1, I know when we met last time, there was things in there that Travis hadn't gotten to me yet. He was out. He wasn't in the office, so there is some things added there. The biggest being the filter media replacement. So that was really the biggest change on Travis's, and the main bearing replacements on the bases that was added from the draft. On water distribution side, really no changes there. I don't think we updated some of the truck pricing there. So I had them kind of low. So we got that kind of leveled up. You guys stop me if you have questions, just holler at me. On page 5 on electric production, Carl was able to get better pricing on the truck scale, so that did go up a little bit. We did 80,000 before, and that's really what a lot of this was just trying to get better pricing, going into the fiscal year. On our distribution side, not really much changed. I think the biggest change was the replace the broken concrete. I think we had 8,000. I think Doug got a number around 27,000 is what it was actually cost. So that number had been kind of carrying it forward.
Well, and more concrete broke too, I believe, didn't
More
it, Doug?
It's busted up, and then the first one was anticipating us doing the demo on that concrete, and the 27,000 was turnkey.
Yeah, if you go out here and look, another section fell off that
Yeah, it's blistered up. It's terrible shape.
is,
Yeah, that was really one big change there. I think the other departments, there was no changes. Everything else looks pretty solid. On the admin, we did add a roof to replace the roof over the drive-through. With all the changes we've made up there, I'd like to get that replaced, I think. On the budget summary, on page 816, what that did is it did raise our 2022 budget up 321,000 to 14,916,000. I think overall over the 5 years, total increase of over $500,000 on just kind of solid numbers. So if you go back to page 24 on statement operations for the water. Right now, we're looking at a net income of 388, and it looks kind of odd because we're estimating around 712,000 for this year. But like we said, we're budgeting for a 39% increase in benefits. So for the water, that would be roughly 150 grand. So that's kind of why that looks skewed. And over the past couple of years working on the budget, I've tried to clean up our budgeting numbers because a lot of them are just carried over and over, and so I'm trying to get a little bit more leaner on how we're budgeting things. So you might see a negative budget number, but it's really more for this fiscal year than it was. Just the budget numbers have been kind of high, and I can show you an example of that. So if you look at water distribution and transmission down there, I have 658,000 budgeted for 2022, which is down 3.8% from the prior year. But if you look what our estimated costs are, it's 591. So I am inflating that for costs that I think are going to go up. It's just some of our numbers have been high in the past, so I'm just trying to clean that up. So, on the page 25 on electric, I think the biggest thing there is, and I've talked about it, is last year when we budgeted the plant decommission, I had budgeted as a capital project, because my goal was to try to capitalize that and depreciate it. After talking to the auditors, they felt like we should expense it, so I disagree, but, so that 3,798,000, 2.9 million, that's decommissioned, so it's kind of looks odd, and we are gonna have some, with no power plant, we are gonna have fewer expenses over there. And so once again, you'll see that the admin in general is kind of higher in all departments, and that's other benefit costs. And we don't have, look up there, and other income is down, and that was, we don't do ConAgra recycling anymore, so it's a big chunk of revenue on there, 250,000 roughly. On the gas, we are looking at a rate increase for the gas department. MME. So really that's really the only change there. We had some additional maintenance costs last year, but our maintenance contract is getting more, so I kind of included that in there. IT and broadband on page 27. I think the thing is there, I'm trying to, talking with Jim, we've tried to budget for grant customers going in this year. I'm probably a little optimistic there. And then you'll notice that tier 1 revenue is down. Well, I think I had too much budgeted last year. And so what we saw last year with the pandemic is a lot of people were canceling their tier 1 and going to tier 2. Others are doing a lot of online. So while I did drop the budget revenue, it's still kind of even with what we're expecting this year. So really, being conservative and saying there's not going to be much change. I think it will be. Obviously, our admin's up, distribution and transmission's up. Jim's had a couple new hires in there. So wastewater, what we have budgeted in the 15-cent per gallon increase. So you'll see the roughly $700,000 increase in revenue. Other operating revenue does have interest, so you will see some decrease there. And nothing really other than our admin. Pay in lieu of taxes, that's just basically our donated labor. Last year was kind of budgeted high. It's kind of a guess, a lot of that. We don't know how much donated we're going to do as far as helping out. So I kind of got that more in line with what past years have been. Then really on page 29-30 is kind of our summary. As the utility, if you look over there, we're looking at operating revenue of 28 million and operating expenses of 27 million. So we're looking at net income of 1.2, and it's broken out by each department there. With our loans to electric, we're looking at an additional $1 million coming in for the loan payments. So see it down there, $1.8 million, and then there's kind of broken out of loan payments. And then we're looking at total capital projects of 14 million. So we are looking at a decrease in working capital of 10.4 million. And obviously 8.3 of that up there in wastewater is the big chunk of that. And now that's going to be through a loan with NPUA, and then possibly a $500,000 loan through water department for North Street. So 8.8 of that is possible loans for the 10.4. If you guys have any questions, anything in there you have questions about that I didn't cover or hit?
The only thing the Southeast substation budget in here didn't match what we've been plan here? Is that just?
It's been kind of right, yeah, right on track.
Speaking
I've been
of-
taking out what Doug's been spending, so
Okay.
that should be,
The remaining?
yeah.
Okay.
And I know Doug had a lot of projects, but if you look at his next couple of years, it goes down significantly. So that should give us time to kind of start looking at road reserves again. So, but I think next year he only had budgeted like 400,000 or something capital projects next year after we sell. So we had that 161 and then we had Southeast and all of them together. So we're trying to get those wrapped up. And then have a couple of years before I think he had Miami kind of starting up in a couple of years. So,
Well, that's why we have reserves. I mean, we have years where we have deficit spending, and then when we kind of get through some of these larger capital expenditures, like the wastewater treatment plant, substation, transmission line, then we'll hit a spot where we're not doing those really large projects, and we'll be able to build reserves back up. So it's pretty consistent with, how utilities operate, and having those reserves allow us to, maintain stable rates while going through a lot of these larger capital projects, with the exception of the wastewater treatment plant. Obviously, that's a really huge project. But, that's the biggest expend this year. Grant's got a pretty good sized water main project that's been on the books on Park Avenue. That's been the owner supervised plan, which should help flows and things in that area. But, yeah, so it's we got some deficit spending this year. We recognize that, but we also recognize that it's not something we do every year. This just happens to be a bigger year than normal.
Are we, about to get a project finished up here, we can get back on line after.
We've got a plan. We actually, in the budget, if you notice, we have a flow study with Burns McDonald. We kind of talked about it, covered that in our meeting. I think it's time to kind of actually address the problem. Initially, the problem was in the 90s, customers were flooding. We spent a lot of money since 2008 rehabbing our system. Grant and his group have done a fantastic job. I mean, we've cambered since 2008. We've probably cambered about every main 3 times. We've rehabbed or replaced 20.6 miles of line. Now Nolan's flooding, so we've really moved the problem. Now we need to focus on I&I and fix the problem. And to do that, we have to identify, where the worst areas are, and we've got that in the budget. What we've done is we've split what we normally spend on I&I. We're going to still do I&I this year because we've got that I&I, that $5 that's designated to go into the I&I account. We split what that income is on an annual basis up between CIPP and a flow study. So we're going to continue to do CIPP, open cut mains, but at the same time, we're going to start looking at where the problem is and work on a solution towards reducing I&I as much as we can. Because as we talked about, that's a huge cost. We spend $250,000 a year pumping rainwater, and that's just not good. It's not wise use of our dollars. So we think we can spend that in other places. But yeah, this is kind of the year, I think, where we're shifting towards really looking at the root cause of I&I and trying to resolve it.
But we're still planning on doing I&I, just not as much.
Well, CIPP.
Or CIPP,
Yeah, I don't want to put this.
No, we're not.
That's
But
too good of a thing.
yeah.
I think we've only budgeted 150 versus
150. So it's about
300,000.
Yeah, about 300,000 that $5 brings in. We're going to spend 150 on I&I or CIPP. Too many lettered things there, but so we're going to do about 150 of that on CIPP, and we're going to split the other half on I&I investigation and mitigation moving forward. So, and Burns and McDonald's got a lot of experience doing that. A lot. They've been got some equipment that we don't have. They'll correlate flows with rain events and can really take an in-depth look at that and help us identify where the really bad places are, and that's where we'll start. So
code council?
Tuesday. Like Monday's a holiday, so Tuesday it will be we're presenting it to them for the first reading. If pending your approval.
I'll make a motion to approve the annual budget for the fiscal year of 2021, 2022 for MMU as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the annual budget for fiscal year 2021, 2022 for MMU as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Only other thing I got in there is just kind of let you guys know where we're at with the half loan. I showed just kind of this quick summary of what's been approved and what's pending in the disbursements today. I think right now, the T-bill rate is 0.06. And then that'll be updated in December. So I'll just kind of keep you guys in the loop as that's going forward. On software, we've been most of last week training with Tyler on financial software. I've got most of this next week with them on the billing side of it. So we're moving along. I think our go live on the financial is February, and then hopefully April will be the billing side of it. So just trying to keep you guys in the loop on that. Other than that, that's all I've got. If you guys have any other questions.
Any other questions for Tony? Thank you, Tony. Let's move on to wastewater with Nolan.
Morning.
Morning.
I do have an action item. This October, we are due to reapply for our NPDES permit. I think October 3rd, I believe, is our deadline for that application. We would like to use Kim, for our pre-treatment things, but she's worked with several companies or several municipalities across the state on this also. I would like to just keep working with her if possible. She has most of our information anyway. So she's agreed to do this for an amount to exceed price of $15,000. Seemed pretty solid to Jeff and I. But I guess we're just looking for a motion to accept the proposal from Kim Peck for a not to exceed price of $15,000 for an NPDES permit renewal system.
This is the permit that allows us to operate the plant. It's the big 5-year permit. It's running on a 5-year cycle.
So the NPDES permit is actually given by EPA, but it acts as your state operating permit. So it's EPA and DNR approved.
Do they look at the last 5 years, or they anticipate the next 5 years? Or combination?
We pretty much operate on
Well, they set your limits on what your effluent can be. I don't know how much they look back at what your past permit has. I mean, there'll probably be some modifications.
Yeah, there'll be a modification of some sort, I'm certain. But we send in all our information monthly or quarterly, depending on what it is. So they have all that information up to this point. The only thing we did different was the expanded effluent testing, which was kind of new. We still have one more set of samples to do on that before October. But, so yeah, they'll look at our past record and see how good we've done or how poor they think we've done. And then moving forward, they'll start to. And that's kind of with the aeration project, something we're looking at is for the last 5 years, we've had to quarterly monitor the stream and our effluent for nitrogen and phosphorus. Those are kind of the new things coming down the line. So there's a potential, based off of our information over the last 5 years, that at some point we get one of those limits, but it wouldn't just happen next May when this thing's, or March, I guess. When we get our new permit, there's not going to be a limit then. It'll be down the road. They may mention something about it. So.
They just finished looking at your effluent where your discharge is at, so they did monitoring on the stream, Salt Fork above and below, our plant, and kind of to see what effects, the effluent has. And we haven't seen that report yet, have we?
No. I think that-
Oh, okay.
I make a motion to accept the proposal from Kenneck for a not to exceed price of $15,000 for NPDES permit renewal assistance.
Second.
Motion and second to accept the proposal from Kim Heck for a not to exceed price of $15,000 for NPDES permit renewal assistance. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. I really don't have a lot to add to what else is there unless you guys have any questions.
Any other questions for Nolan? Thank you, Nolan. Electric production, Carl?
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
The, don't really have a lot to add. The demolition project's kind of winding down. They just have a few little odd things. CR fence is slated to be here probably in a few weeks. That's provided that the dirt's in place. I think it will be to get the fence across there. And I point out the cloud point on our fuel's down to 15.5, 16 below. So it's if we get hit like we did last winter, should be good there with fuel status. Other than that, I'll be glad to answer any questions anybody has any.
Thank you, Paul.
Yes, sir. Always leave a little bit of room in the top of them in case we test it and, you've got algae growing or something, you need to add chemicals. So we need to leave room to put in a tank or two. But other than that, yeah, they're about as full as we keep them.
Well, there's a lot there next to the Vermont building that they're building that tower on.
I'm not positive. I believe the Nazarene Church owns that property.
Who's putting that up?
I've seen AT&T on some stuff staged over there. So.
Who's on the locate?
What's that?
That's who calls on the locate.
Okay. Just curious. Any other questions for Carl? Carl? Thank you. Let's move to underground grant.
Morning, John.
Hey.
We did get kind of the report back, no estimate on what it'll cost to clean it, but they said they've knocked that number down from 3.5 inches to 3 inches of sediment in the bottom. There was no structural damage to the tank, so it looks like the quote will only include cleaning the sediment. You can see in the pictures on the first page, that is the old mixer sitting, and you can kind of see the sediment on the bottom of the tank there. And you can see where they inflated that air balloon to get it out, and they brought the new one in the same way. The bottom picture, that's the northeast corner of the reservoir, and that is, for all intents and purposes, that's bare concrete. There's nothing in that corner. It's just kind of random the way the water comes in there. It comes in the northeast corner, down the north wall, around, and then it actually is 90'd up and actually comes in the top of the tank. So that water kind of swirls around the outside. Most of your sediment's in the middle, and the mixers are helping that. I would say a lot of this sediment was in there before the mixers. That's the way the Divergen 17 kind of recorded it. Why it was kind of drastic there. And the estimate is done on cubic yards. So it's about, on my estimation, 2 inches shy of what I thought it would be. So I do believe that our budgetary number should be pretty close. We had 60,000 in there, I think, and the inspection and change out was only roughly 24,000 of that. I think we'll come in under budget with the numbers we got. Other than that, we do have fire hydrant flushing and there's gonna be timed with the chlorine conversion this year. We'll start flushing hydrants on October 10th. And the crosstown tie, we do have all the customers swapped to the new main. Helps kind of limit it as to taking the old main out of service at the moment and street repair. But that's all coming down the pipe. And we did get started Monday on Jefferson and made good progress. Looks like we're gonna get wet for a while now, but everything's going pretty smooth over there. But that's all I have unless the board has any questions.
Just to go up and get the tank.
I did not. It's 58-degree water. I thought I could do without that.
Any other questions for Grant?
Hey, wait, quick correction on mine. I think I said that Nazarene Church, I meant the Assembly God. The one right beside it.
Thank you, Grant. Let's go to water treatment with Travis.
Morning.
Morning.
Next two pages in your packet, just kind of give you some of those reports that I had. We had one concern party stop by one of the meetings a while back and everything. So I went through on the residual treatment plant and also did filed the figures out of the distribution system and everything. So that was for your all information. And then we're shooting concern with the compliance and everything, which that's based on the distribution system samples, not leaving the plant. So if you look at that second handout, our running annual average, our total quarry residuals based is right at 2.69 milligrams per liter. So it's well below the standard before. So I did that with all of our secondaries and looking at that and everything. And which I didn't include all those, but I think, in my opinion, looking at everything, I think we're right where we need to be. And that. And then one of the updates, actually started spreading the lime sludge yesterday. And now apparently we're rained out, so. So I think that went fairly well, and everything, on the street doing that, so. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
We hadn't spread any line for a long time. If you guys remember, we had that contractor last time. Spent a lot of money to do it, but I think we're kind of getting back. I think there's some new regs as far as soil sampling, but we're taking care of that. Should be able to get that lime spread and dispose of it a lot less cost than we had previously. It's going to be positive. I think the soil samples, once we do those, are good for 5 years. 5 years, so they're 1 to 5 years. So
Sludge you basically got every year that we're gonna apply. Awesome.
we'll kind of get back on track there to what we need to do.
Is there anything in these residual numbers that jumped out at you?
Not really.
Not really.
Kind of my goal on leaving the plant is to have an average about 3.5. And as you can see, we're right at 3.75, so it's pretty close on what I've had those guys try to maintain on average and everything. So I thought it was pretty close, and especially on like the free ammonia also, where the average is 0.06. Kind of like, which that was another goal, to try to stay below 0.1. So we have a little bit of free ammonia to help in the distribution system, but not too much where it can cause an issue with the application and all that. And I was very happy with the numbers I see.
You're happy on that? Any other questions for Travis?
Are we gonna contact her, or is she gonna just leave it as is, or what?
I actually had to give some information to DNR also. I gave them basically these two spreadsheets and also, and I haven't heard a word back from them.
Okay.
So, but she's been in contact with them multiple times and everything. Yeah, so.
Thank you, Travis. I'm gonna move on to IT and broadband with Jim.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim.
We did finish up at Lakeview Trailer Park, got on the splicing done there. Contractor was hoping to start this week, probably next week on the grant. His blade on his plow is a 5-foot blade, and he's supposed to get a 3-foot blade that'll work better for this project. It's supposed to be delivered first part next week, so I'm expecting it'll be starting pretty quick next week. We are still having some issues with supplies. I wouldn't be surprised if we have to shut down installs later this fall, kind of running low on stuff enough that we might have to shut down for a while. And Grant was able to use the big truck for his Jefferson project, so we were able to get that out and about, and didn't have to sit for a year while I was waiting on the plow, so glad Grant was able to use that. That's all I've got, unless you got questions.
Very good unit. That 790 weighs 54,000 pounds, and that truck had no issue at all.
Glad we're using it. Don't have to put it in grades or anything to make sure that people
It is,
know
as far as I'm concerned, it's already paid for itself one time.
Question, Jim?
You been out the Hab Center, Jim?
It's been a couple weeks, but I've kind of been keeping an eye on their contractors and working with Cooper K's on. We'll be pulling some fiber on Lincoln Street, going back in.
Yeah.
To reroute some of our stuff, and some of the stuff that the contractors are doing is kind of messing with us, but I think we've got a plan to work around it.
Thank you, Jim. HR, Megan?
Morning.
Hello.
Not really anything to add to your packet. Probably ought to touch on the health insurance renewals that we received. As we put in the packet, the medical was a 39% increase. United Healthcare is not required to with a group our size, but they did, due to the increase, go ahead and provide, share some utilization data with us. Our loss ratio is running over 280%. We know that they've got 5 large ongoing claims. So we can see some of the things that are driving that increase. It's just a rough spot in the road for us, for our group, really. So a couple of things we got going on there. We are going to try to get proposals. I don't anticipate that we will be able to. I've seen our group's experience to be in better shape than it is right now and have carriers decline. So that is what I am anticipating. However, we're doing our due diligence and we try to do that. So the other thing that we're doing is basically just working to see what can we do to mitigate the impact on employees. The only way to lower that premium is to cut benefits. I don't know that we want to do that. We basically did that last year with the move to United Healthcare. So we're kind of working internally to see if there's other things we can do to try to help with that while we work to get quotes. And then we saw a little bit of an increase on the dental and vision as well. Got those renewals early too. We'll shop those around, and we should have some luck getting some competitive quotes and having some other options to look at there. Another thing that's going on with this renewal, that is basically a 13-month renewal. Just so you guys are aware. I've been working with our broker and carriers for a while to try to get us back on a calendar year for both benefits and policy. Right now, policy year's 12/1 to November 30th, and it just confuses a lot of things for employees, for our cafeteria planning requirements. So we saved a lot of money several years back when we shifted to that different policy here because we meet some of the requirements with the Affordable Care Act. Saved hundreds of thousands of dollars, best I recall. But we're no longer saving on that, now it's just paying, so, we're gonna get things over the course of the next year, shift it back, so things on calendar. Other than that, I don't think I have anything to add to what's in the packet. On the annual department safety reviews, I think Chase and I've got 2 more department heads to meet with those. Get some good feedback from folks. We always appreciate that on any improvements we can make to the safety program. Other than that, I will be happy to try to answer any questions.
Any other questions for Megan? Thank you, Megan. Jeff, you're up.
Morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
I do have several action items for today. The first item is financing for the wastewater treatment plant improvements. Tony and I have been discussing this quite a bit over the last several months. Spent the last 2 days in Columbia at MUA Executive Committee meetings and continue to visit with staff down there about these options. American Rescue Plan Act, there really won't be any movement on that until they get back into session. Session starts at the first of the year. It'll be done in May. Hopefully by then we'll have some answers there. We have requested $6 million in funding with our local state representative for this project. The project itself is scheduled really to kind of, if we would approve that contract today, then obviously it has to go to council. We would be looking at March or April before they would mobilize. And that depends on lead times and a lot of things. So we're hopeful we can hit the front end of it with interdepartmental loans and get some time to get us to ARPA, but there's no guarantees on ARPA. I mean, we don't know, are we gonna get 6 million, are we gonna get 3 million, are we gonna get nothing? I mean, it's just unknown, and I don't wanna bank on it. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and at least apply for the Manly Finance Program funding. Get that process started. It's about a 90-day process. Kind of what I'm looking for today is your approval to start that before we would expend any funds or make any decisions on what type of loan or path we would choose. I would want to bring that back to you guys. So just kind of want to stay ahead of the game, be prepared. Obviously, at the end of the day, the best thing to do would be get $6 million from American Rescue Plan Act and do a $3 million interdepartmental. That would be the best thing for our best case scenario. But because you don't know, there's a lot of people, down there, everybody's got their hand out for these funds. I mean, I heard of a $61 million broadband project in South Missouri that somebody's applying for. I mean, these funds are good for water, wastewater, and broadband. We've really seen a big push for broadband, particularly in rural areas, beginning with USDA grants. Now they're going into ARPA funding to get broadband in the rural areas. So 2.3 billion is what the state has. I mean, it sounds like a lot of money, but the more I hear of different people and the projects that are being submitted, I don't want to count on getting anything. I'm sure hopeful, but I think we need to take this path to cover ourselves in case it doesn't, we don't get the full amount or whatever. So.
Jeff, what happens if we approve applying for this $91 $9,100,000.
Up to 9.1 million.
What happens? We just apply for that?
I'm gonna take it to a point where, and I'm upfront, I've been discussing with the MPUA staff that is transparent as I am with anybody. These are our intentions. They know how we're proceeding, and they've presented different options. We could do interest only payments. We could do, so they're familiar and they want to work with us. I'm going to take it to the point where it's not going to put people out a lot before we spend money. But we don't have to, we're not committed to taking.
I guess that's
If that's the question you're
Now,
asking.
if we go through the 90-day process and get approved or whatever, and then end up not using it at all.
Right.
Is there any repercussions?
No, we're going to go to a point where we don't have to continue on. We're going to go to a point where we've got options. We should know more, and then we'll have more information.
Do we even know the percentage?
Interest rate, we're thinking 2.7 is what we've been given.
Somewhere between there.
And we'll know a little bit better, because what they'll do, part of this 90 days, is they're going to go out and shop. They're going to go out and shop, they're going to go to different banks, lenders, and, be competitive pricing and options from, I think they've got 8 or 9 lenders they work with. So,
Worst case scenario, we could be adding $1 million to the cost of the plant.
well, if we do 3 million interdepartmental, I don't know what that number would be. I think Tony's numbers are figured on
I'm
a
going
$9 million loan.
$90,000.
That's if we go with full.
Right. That's the worst case scenario.
That's
Absolute worst case scenario.
I think our total, like, I can't remember what, I don't have the slide in front of me, but I think if we were to borrow the whole thing through an internal loan and we stayed at the current rates we're at now, I think we'd only pay like $35,000 in interest on the length of the loan. Whereas if we go through NPU, and that could change based on the T-bill rates, obviously, but if we were to go through NPUA, we're looking at, what was it, 1.1 to $1.2 million,
1.17, right.
million in interest.
Worst case scenario,
Which is absolute, and
which would add $1 million to the cost.
Right. Well,
prepare for the worst, hope for the best. I mean, that's kind of the utility industry. And that's what I want you guys to see as worst case. And obviously, if we do $3 million in interdepartmental, we're already way better than worst case. And then, we're gonna, that's kind of our starting point, and then we're gonna work to get the best we can from that point. So, and I think this is a good example. It shows over the years what we've been able to save our community by doing it in a departmental loan. I mean, you're borrowing money from yourself. We're loaning money from our electric department at no cost to that department, but saving water and wastewater customers and therefore rates a tremendous amount of dollars. And we want to continue to be able to do that as well.
Which is why we have the reserves we do.
Which is why. Now, we don't have enough reserves to cover a $9 million project. I mean, it's just, we don't. But this ARPA funding is really the key to this whole deal. We've worked with the state rep, and we've provided him a lot of details and information that he has requested before session closed last May, I think April and May. We submitted stuff on the grants project as well. So we've got requests in for funding, not just for this project, but for another one. So
How much did we grant, requests on grants project?
$2.5 million. So we're looking at $8.5 million combined.
6 for this, 2.5.
6 for this, $2.5 million for that. If you guys know, we just got we've got $8 million in broadband. So anytime we can bring, outside dollars into our community to help pay for these projects. So that's we're going to work very hard to make that happen.
Let's set up like a draw note where, say, or it's a government deal, so who knows how long it really is going to take, right? So say they mobilize in March and we get our first invoice April for $1.5 million. Can we just use $1.5 million from MPUA and then that's all we're paying interest on, or they hand us 9.1 and you're immediately?
No, We could set it up multiple ways.
Like kind of like we have in the city where they just
Right,
they do draws off.
we could do interest only, we could do draws, we can do it where they give us the entire amount, and that's what I'll bring back to you guys. This will kind of get us to that point, which I think we should start to know a little bit more about ARPA at that time. Because once we pick a path, there'll be closing costs involved. And then we'll be out some money there. We don't want to, I just don't want to wait until January or February to start this 90-day process. And I'm just looking for approval now. I'll consult with them a little bit more. I may not start this for a month. It's just going to depend on, more consultation with that group down there.
Did we determine whether these ARPA funds could be used to repay debt?
That's been
Capital
discussed. So MPUA has a lobbyist that stays involved and up to date on these projects. He had a meeting a couple weeks ago, and they discussed that, because if they don't enable debt to be paid, what they're creating is a bunch of people waiting to begin projects. And they don't want to do that, because if everybody's in the same position we are, we don't want to get to a point where we incur debt that we can't pay off. And so, but we're kind of between a rock and a hard place. The condition of our plant, if we don't start, I mean, we're gonna lose it. So that's being discussed, but I think that's why we're gonna do the front end with interdepartmental loans, which I don't know. We need to look at that as well and see if that would be considered as debt. Which, if we're just going for $6 million, it shouldn't matter anyway. We're not going to pay that $3 million back.
So best case scenario, ARPA for 6, interdepartmental for 3.1. Could we do go ahead? I mean, what would be the difference if we did go ahead when it started with the 3.1 internally, and then only relied, say ARPA just fell apart and nothing happened there, then we would only borrow at 6.
Right.
From
And that's an
MPUA.
option that we're, right.
And I mean, that's at least $3 million that we're not paying 2.75%.
Right. Yeah, what I've got is worst case scenario. I mean, who knows what we
So
have.
worst case scenario,
If we have a
we're
natural
interdepartmental.
disaster that hits and we spend $3 million in interdepartmental loans,
On something else.
there's too many unknowns. But I mean, it's best. We're not going to move forward until I'm going to bring back options to you guys. This is just allowing Tony and myself to continue to start this process and apply for it. And get this moving forward. We're not going to get to a line. We're not going to cross a line where we can't stop before we come back to you guys. But since it's 90 days, best case scenario, 90 days. So we kind of want to go ahead. If we start now, we're looking at the first of the year before we really probably have to make any decisions. So I like staying ahead of things. I don't want to get painted in a corner where we have to do this under time constraints. And really, if the plant was in better shape, we could delay this, but if we don't, if there's a potential, we could spend a couple $100,000 on equipment we're replacing.
If you can find it.
If you can find it, if you can, it's just, we're going on borrowed time on that plant right now. It's 27, 28 years into it. It runs continuously day in and day out. It should have been replaced by now. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. We can't look back. I'm not going to look back and say why we didn't or did. We've got to move forward. I just would like, approval to start that process and let you guys know that I'm not going to make any decisions. We're not going to borrow money. We're not going to do anything until I bring those options back to you. We should know more at that time.
Make a motion to approve applying for Missouri Association of Municipal Utilities, MAMU Finance Program funding up to $9.1 million to pay for improvements at the wastewater treatment plant.
Second. Motion and second to approve applying for Missouri Association of Municipal Utilities Finance Program funding up to $9.1 million to pay for improvements to the wastewater treatment plant. All in favor? Opposed?
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Second action item I have is just the annual MSTC agreement. See my recommendation there. Allow the agreement to renew automatically. We've got new executive director over there. I really like her energy. I think it's a tough position. It's competitive and trying to make things happen isn't easy, but I certainly think that we got the right group over there, and that if you try hard enough, long enough, you're going to make something happen. I think that's the attitude of staff, and I know myself and the rest of the board as well. So my recommendation would just be to allow that to continue.
Motion for no action.
Just all right, thank you. Now on to the last one, Burns McDonald Design Build Agreement for wastewater treatment plant improvements. You should have a memo in front of you. We got that contract Monday, no, Friday. I think we got it Friday. Our staff's reviewed it, sent it over to Josh Taylor for his review. He didn't see any issues with it. So based on everybody's review, we would like to go ahead and recommend approval of that contract. As Brian mentioned when he was here, pricing volatility, part of the funds that they had, $248,000. There's some money in there for escalation. If we don't get this going, we don't get some contract signed, some pricing things signed. There's a possibility, a pretty good possibility, we could see some price increases. And that was before the hurricane. We discussed that here the last couple of weeks. So everything's probably getting ready to go on. So, and again, as I mentioned, we're operating on borrowed time with that plant. I don't want to delay it enough that we're going to end up spending money down there because we have to treat the water. We don't have an option. There's things that break.
Here's the way the game's played. Go ahead and get the contract signed, and it's up to the contractors to get ordered. We try to wait, see the prices come down so they can make more money. Either way, it's off the market. It's on them.
Yeah, that's
the long word.
Yeah, Steve's got it.
Will there be 2 readings for that?
I'm going to request 1 reading. That's going to be my recommendation to council. What they do with that, I know Dewey and Councilman Thompson were at the meeting we had. I did go ahead and tell them that. I think the mayor's aware of it. I think she indicated to me she was going to communicate that with council. So it shouldn't be a surprise to them Tuesday night, I think. And again, Brian and some of that group is going to be there to kind of, pass on the concerns and the pricing and the chance that there might be some escalation. Yeah, until it's signed,
Still, so they can always revise.
they can revise it and say, hey, our vendor called us and steel prices went up. And, it's going to be $50,000 more. So the sooner we get this done and get this on to them, they're responsible for those increases. And they've got money, and there's contingency money on our part and some on their part. And once we shift that over to them, it decreases our risk on the contingency part of the work here. So, because some of that $248,000 is for price escalation.
Has to be done, so I make a motion to request the city council authorize the mayor to sign this sign and build agreement with Burns and Final Engineering Company for improvements Marshall wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $8,944,500.
Second.
A motion and a second to request the city council authorize the mayor to sign the design build agreement with Burns and McDonnell Engineering Company for improvements to the Marshall wastewater treatment plant in the amount of $8,944,500. All in favor? Opposed? Good.
Thank you, gentlemen. Couple things. Power plant's pretty much about done. And so I've talked to Mudmuck staff on the availability of that piece of property for generation should that need arise for the pool. I'm working on getting the capacity for the natural gas transportation line. BHM&G, who built the line, is going to get those numbers to me. Did talk to John Krotzinger, who's the power contractor, power supply engineer at Mudbuck, and he's pretty interested in it. I think it's kind of getting that information in ahead of time. Should something come up, they will have what they need to consider, another option moving forward. So, been communicating that with them. Like I said, we did have two days of executive committee meetings, working on budget approval down there as well. One of the pool-owned resources, they've got a gas generator at Ladonia. It's part of a ethanol plant. We've got really low-cost power that comes off that unit. It's about 14 megawatts. They have a short in the generator, so that resource is kind of out of the mix, similar to the short we had. Staff from Macon's pretty close to Ladonia. They've got a similar unit. When we're working on getting that pulled out, and I think they're getting ready to ship that. I think that's going to Ohio to get repaired. So hopefully they get a fairly decent turnaround on that and get that back in service. Annual conference. I hope you guys went down to that a few years ago, I believe. Kyle got an award. That has been, the in-person's been canceled. It's moved to virtual this year. They've got some pretty good programs lined up. We'll still be able to do those virtual. Solar farm, the 5 solar farm purchases should happen by the end of this year. Marshall's is included in that. They're going to do, what they may look at is having each city that hosts those do the maintenance on those as far as mowing and upkeep. I think we can do that at a lower cost than MC Power. So that was discussed. I think we're going to allow them the maintenance contract for the first year on some of the technical stuff, have staff go with them when they make their annual checks and see how that goes, evaluate it, and then move to having that done either with MPUA staff or locally to try to keep those costs down for maintaining those. Probably looking at $70 power moving forward, which is not too bad. I mean, by buying them, we prevent price escalations that would probably put us in the $80, $90, $100 range. So there was a savings to buy these at this point. I think having these in our portfolio is going to help us moving forward. The second 5-farm purchase will take place next year, fiscal year 2022. There is some debt service, about over $20 million of debt service that will be issued to purchase these 5 this year. One of the big things that they're really looking at now is our Prairie State plant. It's a coal-fired plant that's in Illinois. And Illinois does not want to have any more coal generation. So there's debt service on that plant until January 1st of 2043. That asset could serve the owners until 2060. Pretty sure that's not going to happen. We're just hopeful that we can get, right now I think the Illinois legislature passed passed legislation with the date of 2045. That we could probably live with. The governor didn't like it. He wants to see 2035. So there's a lot going on there. We're a minority owner in that, so there's other people with interest as well. So anyway, that's I think as far as the solar farms come in, I think if we have some other investments in renewables to lower our carbon footprint, we may be able to use that to keep this plant operating overnight. So it's a lot of moving parts there, but MQA staff is on top of that and will keep me informed, and I'll keep you guys informed. There's a dues increase to MPUA this year. It's to support broadband lobbying. We've never had all the lobbying before. Down there is for water, wastewater, electric, so that's kind of how our dues are based. There's a continued need. Broadband is growing in municipals. I think they're looking for a $20,000, additional $20,000 to support lobbying efforts for broadband. Our portion of that's $1,700. So I think, considering where we're at, that's money well spent. The big payer is going to be Springfield. Then you've got Carthage, Houston, Missouri is doing a fiber to the home. They're starting to do broadband. So it's going up just a small amount. Dues went from right around 20,000 to 21,700, but I think that just covers the change in municipals getting into broadband and having people down there. It's not really, I think, talking to you yesterday and Kyle, who's the legislative representative for Springfield. A lot of those legislators have good intentions, but they're just situationally not aware. They may not know Marshall has fiber to the home. They may not know what Houston's Missouri is doing. And that's really what this is to support, basically educating legislatures about what municipals do, what role we play, and how that benefits. So I think that's a move in the right direction. That's pretty much it on the conference. The next board meeting date is Thursday, September 16th. If possible, I would like to move that to Friday, the 17th. I think there's some meetings in Jeff City on broadband that they'd like me to participate in because of our broadband that we have here. I think that would be good if I went. So guys, check your calendars and let me know if that's okay. We'll go ahead and schedule it that day, and I'll let Jewel know that I'm available for whatever they need down there.
Any questions for Jeff? Thank you, Jeff. Move on to cash disbursements.
Tyler started to do the software too, so kind of new, yeah.
Make a motion to pay bills.
Second.
Motion second to pay the bills, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Except that one's expensive. I think.
Is there any other business for the good of the board? report from underground in there. Thank you very much for that. See what Grant's up to.
Did a good job over there. So,
Heard is key. Next board meeting is Friday, September 17th. I would entertain a motion to enter into executive session for legal.
Steve Mills, aye. Ian Brown, aye.
Yeah.
5 minutes?
5 minutes next.
Good.
that's when you- I may have to eat one of Spencer's donuts too.
Get them while they're hot.
Get them while they're hot.
I don't like